This video is brought to you by Skillshare. After Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's re-election earlier this month, world leaders rushed to X to congratulate him. Last time Modi was re-elected in 2019, China's President Xi Jinping was actually one of the first to congratulate him, and actually did so before the official result had even been announced. This time, however, Xi didn't congratulate Modi himself, and instead got his Premier Li Qiang to do it nearly 2 weeks late. But perhaps even more notably, Modi himself responded effusively to a congratulatory message from Taiwan's recently elected president, Lai Ching-te, saying that he looked forward to closer ties between Taiwan and India. While India officially adheres to Beijing's One China policy, and Modi conspicuously refrained from using the words Taiwan or president, this was still enough to provoke an angry reaction from the CCP. China's foreign ministry warned that Modi's comments were a violation of the One China policy, and insisted that India was obliged to resist the Taiwan authorities' political calculations. All this is a symptom of a wider deterioration in relations between India and China recently. So in this video, we thought we'd take a look at the history of the two countries' relationship, and why things have been going downhill recently, despite showing tentative signs of improvement only a few years ago. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. So let's start with a bit of context. Despite strong economic relations, China is currently India's largest trading partner. Sino-Indian relations have always been strained by two things: an ongoing border dispute and China's close relationship with Pakistan. When it comes to the border dispute, China and India disagree over the territorial status of Aksai Chin, an area administered by China as part of Xinjiang, and Arunachal Pradesh, an area administered by India. The two sides have fought multiple wars over the border, including most notably the Sino-Indian War of 1962. There have been multiple skirmishes more recently, but in 1996, the two sides signed an agreement banning military weapons and explosives along the border, which means that today the skirmishes are fought with improvised weapons like iron rods and barbed bats. India also doesn't like China's close relationship with Pakistan. For context, China and Pakistan have enjoyed a remarkably friendly relationship ever since they established diplomatic ties in 1951, when Pakistan became one of the first countries to sever relations with the ROC government in Taiwan in favour of the PRC. China has long provided Pakistan with significant amounts of military and economic assistance, while Pakistan has been one of China's staunchest diplomatic allies, providing support over issues like Xinjiang, Tibet and Taiwan, and the CCP have long dreamt of building an oil pipeline through Pakistan to resolve their dependence on vulnerable maritime imports. However, the main motivation for both countries is that the relationship acts as a geopolitical hedge against India, something India is understandably uncomfortable with. A few years ago, though, it looked like Sino-India relations were on the up. Sino-India relations arguably peaked in early 2015, when bilateral trade was ballooning, and both sides were engaged in a diplomatic charm offensive after Modi's first election, in part because Modi was willing to pursue a more independent foreign policy than his predecessors. At the time, Pew polling suggested that Indians had the most positive view of China of basically any large country. Sino-Indian relations then faltered in the latter half of the 2010s, largely thanks to an uptick in violence among the border, including the 2017 Doklam standoff, but there had been tentative signs of rapprochement in the last couple of years. At last year's BRICS summit, for instance, Modi and Xi agreed to attempt a de-escalation of the border standoff, and China's ambassador post in New Delhi, which had sat vacant for 18 months, was finally filled in May. However, in the past few months or so, Sino-Indian relations have once again deteriorated, as evidenced by the Taiwan furore. This is for at least 5 reasons. First, while China and India do a lot of trade, like many other countries, India is increasingly concerned about its growing economic dependence on China. India imports significantly more from China than it exports to China, and India's exports are mostly stuff like food and primary goods, while China's exports are high-tech manufactured goods like phones, solar panels and electric vehicles. Under Modi, India is also getting more interested in industrial policy, but this puts it in implicit competition with China economically, because industrial policy usually focuses on developing manufacturing industries that China often dominates. Second, India has developed increasingly strong commercial ties with Taiwan, largely because India wants to develop a domestic semiconductor industry and offers an alternative home for Apple, which is currently trying to extricate itself from China. Taiwan's Power Chip Semiconductor Manufacturing Corp, or PSMC, is currently building a chip-making plant in Modi's home state of Gujarat, while Taiwanese manufacturing giant and iPhone manufacturer Foxconn has recently expanded its manufacturing base in India. In February, India also signed an agreement to bring Indian migrant workers to Taiwan to ease the island's long-standing labour shortage. Third, despite a brief hiccup late last year when the US accused an Indian official of trying to assassinate a US citizen, India has been moving closer to the US. This is in part a reaction to escalating geopolitical tensions. India sees the US as the most effective security guarantor against both China specifically, but also the more general geopolitical chaos we're seeing across the world at the moment. But it's also a consequence of the deepening economic relationship between India and the US. For context, bilateral trade has steadily increased over the past couple of years, and America temporarily overtook China as India's largest trading partner in 2023. Fourth, the two sides have been unable to de-escalate the border conflict. Both sides have stopped reporting the skirmishes as publicly as they once did. But in January, India admitted that there were at least 2 violent incidents in 2022, and a couple of months ago, India deployed another 10,000 troops to the area after accusing China of building military infrastructure along the border. But the fifth and perhaps most important reason is the shift in Indian public opinion. As we mentioned a second ago, in 2015, Indians were pretty pro-China, with just a 1/3 minority of Indians expressing an unfavourable opinion of China. Today, however, the polling has flipped. A Pew Research Centre survey published in 2023 indicates that 2/3 of Indians, a historic high, now hold an unfavourable view of China, making India the only middle-income country where a majority has unfavourable views of China. This has a lot to do with the border skirmishes, which are obviously widely covered in India, and have really hurt China's image with ordinary Indians. In this light, Modi's recent pivot away from China should be seen as a reflection of public opinion, and a politically savvy move to shore up his support after a relatively weak showing at the ballot box. A week or so ago, we announced that we're working on a physical magazine which dives deep into the upcoming UK general election. But it turns out that designing a magazine isn't all that easy. So we headed to Skillshare to take a look through some of their design courses. Unlike when we tried to learn InDesign for another, never-released project a few years ago, we were guided through the process quickly and efficiently. And this time, the project will actually see the light of day thanks to Skillshare's incredibly easy-to-follow guides. It's not just that either. You likely already know that Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives with thousands of classes led by industry experts from across film, illustration, design, freelance, and productivity. But Skillshare can also help you take your career or side hustles to the next level with hundreds of career-focused classes. That's courses on everything from how to start a business to maximizing your workflow or how to grow in e-commerce. Another course we used when building the website for the magazine. The best news is that the first 500 people to use the link in the description will receive 1 month free trial of Skillshare. So get started today.